Welcome to the debate. Today we're tackling really the most profound tension that you can find in the material before us, the necessity of a cause for existence itself. And this isn't just about faith, it's an intellectual challenge, one posed by modern cosmology and, of course, the implications of metaphysics.
It is. I mean, the material presents a universe governed by these incredibly rigorous laws. But the questions of its ultimate origin, its design, they push us beyond what we can empirically observe. We're forced into speculation. And the central issue, really, is whether that push demands a supernatural answer.
Exactly. So the core debate is this. Does the origin and the astonishing order of the universe, this reality that began at a definite moment, does that necessitate a supernatural, intelligent cause? For my part, I will be arguing that the universe's necessary beginning and its detailed complexity logically require a foundational higher intelligence.
And I'll be arguing that natural processes, operating under the known laws of physics and the ones we have yet to discover, offer a sufficient explanation, that invoking a supernatural entity to bridge the gaps in our current understanding is, well, it's just unsupported by the rigorous standards of evidence that any genuine explanation requires.
All right, so to lay out my position, I believe we miss a crucial step if we just stop at physics. My thesis is that faith and reason, they converge when we examine the evidence of a universe that is contingent. And by that I mean, it depends on something else for its existence. We all accept the scientific consensus, right? The universe had a beginning, the Big Bang. But the critical, inevitable question that physics can't answer because it operates within the universe is, what caused the Big Bang?
That seems to be the common starting point, yes. But it avoids the crucial matter of whether we need a conscious actor to initiate that cause.
Well, we need a cause that is outside of the system it creates. I mean, something cannot arise from absolute nothingness. If the universe, which exists in time and space, began, then its cause must be something that isn't bound by time and space. That cause has to be necessary, not contingent. We refer to this as the first cause. And by existing outside of created reality, this entity, which I identify as God, is unique. It's uncreated. And that solves the problem of ultimate contingency. And, furthermore, just look at the output. The universe follows these incredibly precise rules. The specific values of the laws of physics, like the weakness of gravity or the exact mass ratio of the electron to the proton, they are so fine-tuned that even a tiny deviation would make stable matter, and therefore life, impossible. That is not the signature of blind chance. It suggests a deliberate, intelligent mind setting the initial parameters.
Okay, my approach starts from, let's say, a more skeptical premise. The core of my position is that everything we observe can ultimately be explained by naturalism, by science and the operational laws of the universe, without relying on any supernatural postulates. We should only accept ideas that are, at least in principle, testable and provable.
And what about the cause of the beginning? That isn't testable.
We acknowledge the Big Bang, of course, but we reject the idea that a divine cause is the only, or frankly, the best answer. Your whole starting premise, something cannot come from nothing, is actually challenged by modern physics. For instance, in quantum field theory, you have particle-antiparticle pairs, what we call virtual particles, that pop into and out of existence from a vacuum. Now, while these happen within our established laws, they do challenge that classical intuition about causality. And more critically, the first cause argument, it just pushes the problem back a level. If everything requires a cause, who created the entity you call God?
But God is, by definition, the uncaused cause.
But that's where the argument fails to provide any conceptual clarity. You're defining the solution into existence. You're replacing the mystery of an uncreated universe with the equally uncreated, yet infinitely more complex entity of God. We have to look at explanatory parsimony, right? The principle that we prefer the simplest explanation that accounts for the facts. Defining God as this necessary uncreated creator requires us to assume the existence of an infinitely complex, conscious entity. Logically, if we can accept an uncreated God, then we should first consider that the universe itself could be the simplest, uncreated, ultimate fact.
That feels like a profound intellectual dodge. If the universe had a beginning, and everything contingent requires a cause, then the necessary starting point has to be uncaused, which brings us to our first central point, the necessity of a necessary being versus this problem of endless regress. And I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because it misrepresents the nature of contingency.
And I see your argument as one of convenience. You simply define God as the one necessary exception to the rule of causality you insist the universe must follow.
But there's a crucial ontological difference between the universe and the creator. The universe is composed of contingent things that could have not existed. The laws governing it, even time itself, they began. Therefore, the cause of that beginning must be a necessary being, one whose very essence is to exist. It must be a greater cause because it brought time and space into existence. You mentioned quantum fluctuations, but those are local events within an existing vacuum. They presuppose the existence of quantum fields, of space-time, of the laws of physics. They don't explain the singularity, the moment the rules themselves were instantiated.
That cause must be an intelligent, conscious mind. Why? Why can't the universe itself, maybe viewed through a set of physical laws we haven't discovered yet, be the ultimate necessary explanation? It is just ontologically simpler to hypothesize the ultimate existence of non-conscious physical reality than it is to hypothesize a maximally complex, intelligent, non-material consciousness. Every time you add complexity to your uncaused entity, you reduce the explanatory power of your solution.
But the complexity of God is justified by the complexity of the outcome, the universe itself. If the universe were simple, then maybe your argument for a brute, uncaused fact would hold more weight. But this complexity, it leads directly to our next point. If you want to talk about utility and complexity, then let's shift our gaze from the beginning of existence to its present architecture, specifically the overwhelming evidence of fine-tuning.
That's a fair pivot. The precision of the physical laws is, it's certainly one of the most intellectually challenging puzzles in cosmology.
Indeed. I mean, consider the value of the cosmological constant. It governs the energy density of the vacuum. If its value were changed by just 1 part in 10 to the 120th power, the universe would have either collapsed immediately or expanded too rapidly for any structures, galaxies, stars, life to form. This isn't just simple complexity. It is staggeringly precise choreography. It's like finding a safe combination where the numbers have to be perfect to 120 decimal places. That level of precision argues powerfully against pure chance.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it differently. The appeal to fine-tuning, while it's compelling in its description of precision, is subject to the anthropic principle, which is often misinterpreted. We are here, therefore the laws must permit us to be here. The fact that we observe a life-permitting universe is a selection effect. It isn't necessarily proof of design.
But that observer bias doesn't negate the objective probability of failure. The probability of the safe combination being found by chance is astronomically low, regardless of whether a successful burglar's standing there marveling at his luck. The precision remains a brute fact that requires an explanation. Why are these constants set to these life-permitting values? Blind chance just seems insufficient.
And the solution you propose, an omnipotent, omniscient designer, is not testable, and therefore it is equally insufficient as an explanation, no matter how elegant it might seem. Furthermore, claiming divine necessity is often criticized as a God of the gaps argument. We don't know why the constant is X, therefore God must have set it to X. That lack of knowledge only proves that science has more work to do, maybe finding a deeper physical theory, a theory of everything, that shows the constants had to be what they are, which would eliminate the appearance of tuning altogether.
But waiting for a theoretical, as yet unproven future explanation seems to prioritize method over the most coherent explanation available right now. The sheer improbability we observe demands a powerful explanation.
But coherence has to be tied to evidence, not comfort. The lack of knowledge is precisely why we have to reserve judgment. And we have plausible naturalistic frameworks that avoid invoking a supernatural cause. For example, have you considered the implications of the multiverse theory?
The multiverse theory is, it's often introduced precisely to avoid the theological implications of fine-tuning.
Perhaps, but it is rooted in physics, not theology. If there exists a vast, maybe infinite ensemble of universes, each with randomly varying physical constants, a concept suggested by certain models of inflation, then the immense improbability of our universe becomes, well, inevitable. We simply happen to reside in the one universe where the constants fell within that narrow, life-permitting range.
I see why you might use the multiverse, but conceptually, it feels like an infinite escape clause. You are solving the problem of one improbable universe by positing an infinite number of unobservable, untestable universes. In terms of explanatory parsimony, which you favor, invoking an infinite number of realities is hardly simpler than invoking one intelligent creator. At least the intelligent creator, being non-spatial and non-temporal, resolves the causality problem. The multiverse just multiplies the number of contingent entities needing explanation.
That is a powerful way to frame the simplicity argument, but I think it overlooks the difference between a philosophical postulate and a scientific hypothesis. The multiverse emerges from certain scientific models like eternal inflation, which are themselves testable in principle, even if the universes within them are not. The existence of a conscious entity existing outside of space and time, however, it has no connection to any physical theory we are currently investigating. And this brings us to the crucial element here, evidence, and the limits of our investigation.
And that is where we diverge most sharply.
Indeed. So I'll reiterate my core position. Everything we know and can investigate is explained by natural processes. You have consistently posited a supernatural cause, an entity existing beyond the physical domain. So where is the scientific proof, the empirical evidence for this entity's existence or its intervention? If the creation event is non-material, how could we possibly detect its residue within the material world?
This is where we have to draw a clear boundary. We have to acknowledge the limitations of material science to address non-material causation. To demand empirical evidence for an entity that exists prior to and outside of the empirical domain is to commit what philosophers call a category error.
Could you clarify that? What do you mean by a category error?
Certainly. A category error occurs when you apply a tool or a concept to a domain where it just fundamentally does not belong. Demanding scientific proof for a non-material entity is like trying to measure the temperature of a room using a stopwatch. You're using the wrong tool for the wrong domain. Science is limited to measuring material reality. So I can see that scientific proof for a non-material, uncaused entity is absent. But that absence does not equate to disproof.
But without any empirical handles, your necessary cause simply remains a philosophical construct. So why should we prefer a coherent philosophical construct over an empirically grounded, albeit incomplete, scientific investigation?
Because the framework of an intelligent mind provides a more complete, more coherent explanation for the existence and the ordering of the natural laws themselves. Purely empirical science describes how those laws operate, but it can't address why those laws exist in the first place or why they are ordered in such a way that allows for complex reality. An uncaused non-material mind provides a foundation for the precision we observe, whereas naturalism, at the boundary of existence, can only offer theories of uncaused brute facts or unobservable infinite contingencies. A greater cause remains the most logical explanation for a complex, contingent universe that had a definite beginning.
Logic is crucial, I agree. But when you're dealing with physical reality, it must be tethered to verifiable facts. We have to maintain that the most rational response to profound complexity without a definitive natural explanation is not to insert a maximally complex, unproven entity. It is to admit our ignorance and continue investigation within the realm of the testable. If we accept the idea of an intelligent, uncaused entity to explain the universe, we have merely shifted the burden of explanation onto something far, far more difficult to conceive of and understand.
But that shift maintains the coherence of causality. So, to conclude my position, the fundamental fact that the universe had a beginning, which is established by cosmology, and that it displays this extraordinary, precise order, that it's highly improbable by chance, this points logically and strongly toward an uncaused, intelligent creator.
The dependency or contingency of the universe demands a necessary, non-contingent foundation that transcends the physical laws it established.
And to summarize my counterposition, while the universe's origin and fine-tuning are certainly profound mysteries, invoking an unproven supernatural entity to solve the problem of ultimate causation is, I think, conceptually flawed. The principle of parsimony suggests we should stop at the simplest uncaused fact, which may well be the universe itself, just defined by deeper physical principles. The supernatural claim simply fails to meet the standard of evidence required to move it beyond philosophical speculation.
This discussion, I think, really demonstrates the enduring power of the material we examine. It forces us to confront whether the universe is fundamentally contingent and ordered by an external mind.
Or if it's fundamentally self-sustaining and a product of chance operating within unknown, deeper principles. It leaves us with the critical realization that this material offers powerful frameworks for understanding this essential question, and it invites the listener to weigh the arguments for logical necessity against the demand for empirical sufficiency. There is certainly more profound exploration waiting.